You ever walk into a room and you just know something's off? That whether it's the hair goes up on the back of your neck or doom and gloom seems to be permeating the room, but you just know something is off. And nobody says anything about it, but you can feel it. I call that the writing's on the wall. Something is going on, and people know it, and you've walked right into it. First time probably the recording of literally a writing on the wall is it's in the Old Testament in the book of Daniel, and King Belshazzar ignores a very public warning. His kingdom's falling apart all around him, and he's going off half cocked, and literally a finger appears on the wall and starts writing a message. And it was not a good message for the king. And the wall always speaks before collapse. Our problem is we don't see it, or we see it and ignore it. And if you do ignore it, you're going to get crushed by whatever that is. And the thing that happened with the king in the book of Daniel, it was not a one time out of the blue event. It was a culmination of things that people around could see and know what was coming. It's kind of like, everybody turning a blind eye. Remember when the old little story about the king's running around naked and nobody will tell him that he's naked, and what a great outfit he's wearing, and everybody just ignored it. Now, the phrase does come right out of Daniel chapter 5, that God's hand literally writes on the palace wall to warn the king that his arrogance, his idolatry, and his kingdom were finished. He was done. It's over with. And clear and unequivocal message. But here's the thing. This isn't the only time in Scripture that writing is used as God's megaphone to try and get people's attention. It doesn't always have to be on a wall. In Exodus and Deuteronomy with the Ten Commandments, the finger of God inscribed on the tablets, the Ten Commandments. And there was no doubt what those commands were. Israel knew what God expected from them. And the wall, so to speak, spoke. But it was on the tablets. And then you look later on in Exodus. Actually, it was earlier in Exodus. I guess I should have started with that one. The magicians in the Pharaoh's court, when they were talking about all the plagues that came prior to the actual Exodus and Pharaoh releasing the people, his magicians came right out and said, this is the finger of God at work. And it's undeniable that when God writes or acts, he's going to follow through with what he says. And that happened in Exodus. So you can't resist it. And a lot of times you also can't explain it. It's a mystery. It's a miracle. It's an act of God. Even if you look in the New Testament, remember when a bunch of townspeople drug a lady out, they're going to stone her to death for her adultery. And Christ is there, and he just kind of squats down, and he starts writing in the dirt. And we don't know what he wrote. It's not shared with us, but it says he started writing in the dirt, and one by one, all of her accusers walked away because they read what Christ was writing. And if I was a guessing man, he was writing down all the sins of the people that were getting ready to stone this lady, and he was pointing out their hypocrisy. That's just an educated guess. But the writing was on the wall, so to speak. It was in the dirt, but the message was clear and it was understood, and that message had consequences. It saved that lady's life. And for whatever was written, it made the people that were going to stone her to death to walk away. So if you go all the way to the end of the Bible in Revelations 20, verse 12, I'm kind of summarizing it here. At the end of all things, when the end of the world happens, the books are going to be open and every deed is written down. That's what it says. It's the final writing on the wall. And nobody gets to plead ignorance. We all know that you don't leave this world alive, and at some time in your life it ends, and you're going to have to face God. And your deeds are written in a book, and not from a judgmental standpoint, but if you were on a lazy river ride your whole life, you were just giving it the old, hey, it is what it is, nothing I can do about it, and you just go with the flow, that's documented. And that's not what God has called us to do with our lives. So a modern translation, if you will, if you take the expression writing on the wall, it almost always in the modern translation is an indication of a clear and direct warning. Because that's usually what people say. And you've probably said it. I know you've heard it. That at work, when somebody gets in trouble and they get disciplined or they're being brought up on specs and charges and they're going to get fired, how many people say, man, I saw that coming? And that means they saw the writing on the wall and they ignored it. They didn't do anything. In my personal professional life, I had an officer, internal affairs came into my office. I was a superintendent, major of operations, and they gave me a packet and said, serve this particular officer with these specs and charges. And it was a fireable offense. And it involved off-duty conduct, misconduct, and alcohol. And I was tasked with serving him with the paperwork and relieving him of duty, taking his gun and badge, and ordering him into a show cause hearing. I get home, and I happen to mention what happened to one of my daughters who worked in an Irish pub in Dayton, Ohio. And I asked her, hey, do you know this guy? Because it's kind of a cop bar. And she goes, yeah. I said, man, I just had to relieve him of duty today for some stuff he did off duty and involved alcohol, and he's going to be fired. And her first response was, well, that doesn't surprise me. And I'm like, what? And she goes, everybody knows he's an alcoholic and has anger management issues. And my daughter, she's in her early 20s. And I go, you knew this? And she goes, yeah, everybody knows it. And then she went on to tell me a story of something that happened on St. Patrick's Day one year between him and an off-duty firefighter. And I just shook my head. So when I got back to work the next day, I called some of my sergeants in, and I said, do you know that this guy has an alcohol problem and is probably an alcoholic and has had off-duty incidents over the years? And they all just dropped their heads and looked straight down. That was a yes. They saw the writing on the wall, but they ignored it. And why do we miss the writing on the wall? Either involving ourselves or other people. That when you hear that, oh, I saw that coming, and nobody did anything. When it happens to us, almost often it involves pride and ego. That, oh, it'll never happen to me. I'll never be put in that situation where, yeah, I kind of had a clear and direct message of consequences, but yeah, it won't happen. Another thing is you get too comfortable and you just go with the flow and you don't want to stir the pot, or I call it the Kermit the Frog mentality, that old meme with Kermit drinking his Lipton tea and the wording on it is it's none of my business. It is your business. And I don't mean being a busybody, but particularly in your work environment, in your home environment, if you ignore the signs and the writing on the wall that bad things are going to happen, and you go, it's none of my business. I'll tell you, in the real world of policing, and you're a supervisor, or even if you're not a supervisor, with a coworker, with the duty to intervene laws, you're going to get sued for dereliction of duty. You're going to get sued for negligent supervision. And it's none of my business, even if it's off-duty incidents, it's none of my business is not a legal defense. We could see this. I told the personal story of having to relieve somebody of business, but even on a bigger scale, how many of us, when the whole defund the police movement started, the whole BLM movement started, how many of us got online or in our conversations, we were reading the writing on the wall. We knew what was going to happen. It surprises no one that we can't keep cops anymore. We can't hire cops anymore. Nobody wants to be in law enforcement. And we were shouting that writing on the wall from the get-go. And it turned out to be true. There are consequences for people ignoring the natural consequences of doing something that drastic without anticipating and at least mitigating outcomes. So, how do you recognize writing on the wall? For yourself, for others, that when it's somebody else that you're seeing, it's listen to the quiet warning signs. Most often, the writing on the wall, in the figurative sense, that you see things going on, are not dramatic explosions of drama. Often, when you start seeing officers or people in your workplace that have become cynical, they're always tired, that they lose focus, that you give them a task and they don't complete it, and their response when asked, "Hey, where's the product I asked for? Where's the report? Oh man, I forgot about that. I'm sorry." That is a good warning sign of the writing on the wall. Something is going on in that person's life. You have an officer that never gets citizen complaints for being rude, and now he's gotten 3 in one work week, and you're like, man, that dude doesn't. That's not him. That's a warning sign. That's a writing on the wall. Something's going on in that officer's life that has impacted his mindset, has impacted his behavior, has impacted his attitude. And you need to you need to watch for those. And when you see them, it's not, you don't drop the hammer, but you do show empathy and compassion, and in private, talk to them. You know, hey, is something going on? How can I help? Watch for patterns of behavior. Watch for, like I said, you get a bunch of rude complaints from somebody that it's out of character, or you start seeing an officer turning in really crappy written reports, that they're just missing the mission and vision of the department in their attitude and in their behavior, that they're making avoidable mistakes, that you can go, hey, there's consequences. I can't turn a blind eye to your screw ups and just give them the get your head out of your ass speech. That doesn't work. Not when the writing's on the wall. It's a sign and a warning. Something bigger and more catastrophic is coming down the road. And I've said it before. You turn a blind eye to problems, eventually you're going to be blind in both eyes, and that's no way to manage or supervise or lead your people. With respect to yourself, you really should have someone, and it can be your spouse, it can be your best friend, I mean, it can be anybody, but literally tell them, hey, you see me starting to go off the rails, or you see something in my attitude and behaviors that it's the writing on the wall, that something is going on. You see it and I don't. I want you to tell me about it. I want you to intervene, to sit me down and ask me, without worrying about me being pissed off. What's going on, Pat? And here's what I'm seeing. Here's the writing on the wall that I'm seeing. You want to talk about it? So literally have someone that you trust enough, and they have the compassion and commitment to you and for you to speak up when they see the writing on the wall. And I'll give you a personal example of that. And I know I've told the story without mentioning names, but I had gotten specs and charges against me when I was a commander over in narcotics, and the people behind it initially actually wanted to try and get me charged criminally. Then they charged me administratively. My hearing on the matter was not even 5 minutes long, and I was convicted of multiple violations, alleged violations of policy, procedure, and rules of conduct. And I clearly remember that on Good Friday, I get a call from the attorney that the decision had come down, and that I was being offered to accept discipline, and the discipline was take a 30-day suspension, forfeit your right to appeal it, or you're going to be fired. So I said to the attorney, I need to call my wife and discuss this. Let her. This is a big thing, because I'm going to lose rank, I'm going to lose pay. 30-day suspension. It's a big deal. So I called my wife, and she goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I want them to fire me. And she goes, we can make ends meet. And she goes, 100% support you. So I called the lawyer back, and I said, tell him to fire me. And she goes, are you sure? And I said, yeah, my wife said it's okay. So she called the attorney for the city that was representing them, because we were in contract negotiations at the time, and I was on the contract negotiation team for supervisors. And so she calls me back and goes, hey, They want 2 weeks to think about this. I said, fine. So 2 weeks later, Friday, and they do this stuff at 4 p.m. In the afternoon. The lawyer calls me back and goes, hey, 30-day suspension, forfeit your right to appeal it, or you're going to be demoted. I said, I don't even have to call my wife. Tell them to do what they got to do, and I'll do what I got to do. Now, here's the writing on the wall. And by the way, I got a 10-day suspension, and I appealed it, and I won the appeal overwhelmingly. I mean, the city was so vindictive about what they were doing that even the arbitrator ordered them to destroy any evidence collected during the so-called investigation, and they weren't even allowed to acknowledge there ever was an investigation. And they use the words egregious and outrageous multiple times. But here's the writing on the wall, and an example of having that person that can come to you and say, hey, this is what I see, and you need to get help. I was having, during this whole thing lasted over a year and a half, from the time the specs and charges to being convicted, serving my 10-day suspension, filing the appeal, and having hearings on the appeal that lasted over a period of 3 months. I was having panic attacks. I wasn't sleeping. I was losing weight. I had a short temper, all sorts of stuff. And my wife finally just said, Pat, here's what's happening to you, and you don't see it, and you don't think you need help, that you can just, plow through it, suck it up, buttercup kind of thing. And she goes, you can't. You need help. So I did. I went and met with the psychologist a couple of times. I was on my doctor put me on Xanax for the panic attacks. And so once I had that opportunity to meet with the professional and talk about what has happened to me and what it's doing to me, that helped me recover. But if I didn't have a spouse who was willing to love me enough to go, in a nice way, Pat, get your head out of your ass, you need help, and here's why, and gave me specific incidents of what I was doing or what was happening, what she was seeing. You need that kind of person. And it's not just at work. It's in your family life. I'm not going to go into any details, but we recently had a family intervention with someone in the family because of things that we were seeing in this person's, and they're an adult, in this person's life, and reaching out in love to go, here's what we're seeing. What can we do to help? So when you see that writing on the wall, do something about it. And I'm not talking about being a fortune teller and trying to look into the future and overreacting. I'm talking about that you are seeing definitive patterns. You're reading them in a person's behavior, how their talk, their failings, if you will, that are avoidable. If you're a good leader, you'll do something about it. And do it before tragedy strikes. I told you about the officer that with the alcohol thing. He actually resigned in lieu of being fired. And a year later, he stopped by my office. Obviously, he's not a cop anymore. And he actually moved out of the county, moved to another county. And he stopped by the office. And in hindsight, I'm pretty sure this was part of a 12-step process. He came in and shared with me and thanked me for treating him with respect and professionally, but it's the best thing that happened to him, and that he's clean, sober, owns his own business now and doing very well. So that's the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. But it took a tragedy of losing his career and his dream that probably was also fueling his alcoholism. But it took that tragedy and an incident that was going to be you're fired. So do the right things at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons. And when you see the writing on the wall, address it, don't ignore it, and you will then be creating a culture in your family life and in your faith life and in your work life of what is expected and accepted in your arena, and ignoring problems and issues that are inevitably going to lead to some sort of negative consequence. Ignoring that is not acceptable, and you would not expect anybody to do anything but the right thing, right time, right way, and for the right reasons. So remember, the wall always speaks. None of this stuff just comes out of the blue. So don't ignore it. Leaders don't, warriors don't, servants don't. And here's my personal challenge to you is this week, ask yourself, what's your wall saying right now? What are other people, do that self-reflection. What are you doing or saying or believing and acting on those beliefs that other people could look at it and go, whoa, something's up with Pat? And ask somebody to literally, hey, tell me what you see in my life right now, particularly not just the good stuff. What am I doing or saying that I don't see the writing on the wall, but you might? And then what are you going to do about it? If someone does say to you, or you on your own, you go, hey, you know what? I'm drinking too much. I'm eating too much. I've let my physical fitness go down the crapper, and that's self-analysis. You recognize that, and you know what's going to happen. If you're 25, 50, 60 pounds overweight, you know the writing on the wall. It's your doctor's telling you. High blood pressure, diabetes, all these things, it's very foreseeable. And if you just ignore it, or maybe it's emotional, and you just like, hey, yeah, suck it up, Buttercup. I'll plow through this. I'll be all right. No, you won't, unless you get the people that can help you. Now, understand this very clearly. Even though, speaking biblically or otherwise, God is not in the business of writing you off. God's in the business of writing you back into his plan for your life. He's not judgmental in the, like we can be in our own personal human relationships, have that gotcha mentality. I got this lazy ass cop working for me, and man, I finally got him. Instead of you're seeing the right, why is he lazy, and trying to save him from himself, to make him a better officer and help him through whatever it is that is causing this behavior that's not acceptable, as opposed to, man, I can't wait for this guy to screw up one more time, and then I got him, and he's out. That's not God. He's here in the business of writing you back in to his plan for your life. So remember this. always, always, warrior, servant, leader. Do the right thing, right time, right way, and for the right reasons. So, thanks for joining us today. I hope you've been inspired and encouraged to lead a life of a warrior, servant, leader. If you need help, ask for it. If you see somebody that needs help, offer it. And share this episode with someone that you think really needs to hear this message today. And if it's you that you really needed to hear this and you want to reach out, man, my contact information is on my LinkedIn. It's on the website for Lawyer Servant Leader Podcast.com. Reach out and ask, and we'll take time to get you back where you want to be as a warrior servant leader. So follow us on LinkedIn. Follow me on Substack, Pat Welsh JD. And as always, take action, crush obstacles, because it's Taco Tuesday. Love you. See you next week.